Hey everyone. So I was showing one of my mentor students some surface detailing in ZBrush as we worked to try and push some ZBrush models to as far as we could take them. And I remembered a couple of really cool tips that I thought I'd share with everyone. And one of the first ones is just with the scatter and the spray. Let me get rid of this and just kind of go back to the beginning here. And you can see as I put a lot of detail on here all the way around. And my best suggestion would be to look at some reference, find some really close detail reference of what you're trying to create, and then use that. And so what I wanted to show first off was just say like using clay tubes, the color spray, and then finding one of these smaller dots. And we're gonna create some big surface detail here. And I'll get rid of all my undos. Let's add a couple subdivisions back up to about 1 million. So we don't even need 1 million. Let's do this. So I can add a lot of detail here. And what I'm going to do is go in really big with big broad strokes first, and then come back later. And so I'm adding here, and then I'm going to hold Alt and subtract. And then go down. And what you'll see is, I'm adding a lot of surface detail here. It's not very good. It's nowhere close to where I was previously, but we need to keep adding on top of that. So I could, from here, keep going and make my brush smaller, add in some more details to fill in spaces, and continue with that, and then hold down Alt to break some of it up. So I always think adding and subtracting from your sculpt is a pretty good thing to keep in mind as you create your work. I always find that when I do this and I keep it in mind, I'm always happier with my results. And this process is really, really time consuming. It's really focused and detailed, but I feel like when I do this, I'm always the happiest with the results in the end after the normal map bakes and everything like that. So it is worth the time if you have it and you're into it. I definitely like doing this type of work and just focusing on it. But one of the things that I wanted to show you was that we have this detail here, and if I subdivide up one more, so from 4 to 5, it gets more detailed, right? But I could always go back down, and then we could heavily smooth this. And this is where things get a little bit interesting, is that I felt like I went too far, right? But I went down one subdivision, did all my smoothing on that subdivision, and then if I go up one subdivision, you can see that I've already retained a lot of really interesting detail here. So previously, if we look at this, this is knocked back a lot of the details. We've got some bigger bumps in here, but we have a lot of the smaller ones as well. So if I undo, this is what we were at before. So just by going down one subdivision, smoothing things out, and we could mix this up. We could use like lighter pen pressure or more somewhere else, and then we can go back up to our higher subdivision. You can see a lot of the bigger shapes are kept, but also a lot of the smaller shapes that were only really put in at the higher level of detail. So let's continue to add some more. And I'm just using this scatter brush just to add some interesting detail at the start. I'm also at a very low intensity, if you haven't noticed that. Usually it starts out somewhere around here, and that's really, really high. But we may want that as well, so maybe we come down to like 23 and we'll just put in some bigger details here. One of the other things that we can do as well is use gravity on our brush. So if we wanted to make this feel like it's kind of heavy and coming down and got some more kind of downward direction to it, we could do that with this gravity brush. And if I turn it all the way up, you'll see it kind of starts things to melt, which is pretty cool. Maybe we don't want to go that far, but let's see what it looks like. All right, maybe we've got some happy accents in here. We can go back up. So now I've got some interesting stuff in here. We'll turn this back down, and let's try something else. So I'm going to smooth this out a little bit, just from these details here. I went a little far with it. And again, I'm just kind of going pretty fast just to show you these features and how I'm able to get some of the details that I like when I really spend some time on this stuff. And I think the other one only took me about 20 minutes from the first one that you saw at the start, so it's not too time consuming. But let's find, let's say, one of these smaller ones. And different brushes work differently as well. So like clay tubes build up works differently than anything else. So let's bring the intensity back down. Let's go really low, but bring our brush size a little bit bigger. All right, I can hold down Alt to do subtractive. And then additive. And then one of the next steps here that I really like is to knock a lot of that stuff back using trim dynamic. So trim dynamic, what we can do, so you'll see is some of this stuff, I'll just scribble over it. We can knock back a lot of these little details in here and flatten some things out. We can also hold down Alt as well and fill in those details. So again, going additive and then subtractive with both the brushes to mix up the results and create some different effects. So back to clay tubes, I'll use the scatter. One of the other things as well is I could use different kinds of alphas. Here I'm just using the dots. Let's try one of these different alphas here, and let's go ahead and go to the alpha and I'll show you what we did. So this is the original alpha, a rock scan. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the radial fade up. So now that we have a dot, and I'll push the contrast up to break that up. And now I'll put this on here. And what you'll see is we've got a very different, more organic look to it. So these scans always help when sculpting, just to bring in a little extra bit of believability into everything. Something that it's hard to sculpt, and using this randomized bit really helps. So again, additive and subtractive to push and pull things back and forth. We can use the gravity brush, which was already on a little bit. You can see it pulls things down, and I could bring some of this up a little bit higher if we wanted to really start to push it. And you can see the stuff really starts to build on top of each other as you go from the bigger shapes down to the smaller shapes, and then down into the finer details, and really start sculpting this stuff in. So it takes a few layers. It's never going to work with just one or two layers, but going back and forth and building this stuff up, and then going down a subdivision, smoothing some of it out. Maybe things went too far. You want to smooth them out. And then going back up. Right, so we got those details, and then we can use the trim dynamic and just come back in here and do add a subtractive again, just to break this thing up and really randomize it. And you may say, like, there's always the option of doing these tileable textures in somewhere like Substance Designer or something like that, which is really great, and you can always use those as alphas as well. But I'm a strong believer that the more that you put into the sculpt, and the more that you can put into the sculpt, really ends up with a much better result in the bake and all of your texture maps and everything. And this is way more time consuming, so there's a balance in what you choose. Do you choose to do it faster, or do you choose to go in here and really sculpt everything out? So maybe for professional work that needs to get done really fast, that has a time constraint, doing this stuff inside of Painter or inside of your materials is the best way to go. But if you had some personal work, if you really wanted to just study materials and start to get a little bit more detailed in your sculpting, you could do something like this. So to finish it off, I'm just going to pick some really small details, and we'll push this up. And let's take the gravity down a little bit, and down in intensity. So I just want to add a few little specks that come out, and then a few that go in. And this is where the pressure sensitivity really comes in handy. So there you go. I think this is really useful. So the tips would be use your scatter brush, build up from big to small, and go down a subdivision or two, smooth things out, and then go back up and see what it's retained, because it's going to retain some interesting stuff for you. I think let's undo that back to where we were. So we've got some details in there. We're still at 1 million. We could go up another one and continue to sculpt on this and add some more finer detail in here. Push and pull things back and forth to get really, really detailed in here. For these last little bits. So hopefully that was helpful. Give you some information on, sculpting those finer details, spending some time. But, I would suggest some reference and focusing on that and matching that. And again, this was just me trying to show you the couple of things, but spending, another 20, 30 minutes on this or on this study with some reference could produce some really good results. All right. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed.